Have you ever stopped, truly stopped, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon and asked yourself, what is it that I am actually carrying? Not the groceries, not the worries about tomorrow's deadlines, not the low hum of digital noise that fills every available silence, but the deeper cargo, the invisible freight of memory and longing and half-formed hope that rides in the chest like a stone that breathes. Because I suspect, if you are honest with yourself in this moment, you know exactly what I mean. And I suspect, further still, that this weight has been with you for a very long time, perhaps longer than you have had words to describe it. We are strange creatures, we human beings. We arrive into this world in a blaze of absolute vulnerability, lungs filling with foreign air for the first time, neurons firing in cascades of bewilderment and sensation. And from that very first breath, we begin the long, winding, and altogether extraordinary project of making sense of what it means to be alive inside a body, inside a mind, inside a world that is simultaneously beautiful, beyond all reckoning, and ruthlessly indifferent to our individual suffering. This is the paradox we are born into. This is the odyssey we did not choose, but are nonetheless obligated to navigate. And yet, and this is the thing that fills me with a kind of reverence I cannot quite contain, the navigation itself is the gift. The journey, with all its turbulence and sorrow and unexpected grace, is not a problem to be solved. It is an initiation into the deepest layer of what you are. Because what you are is not small. What you are is not an accident. What you are is the universe folding back upon itself in a gesture of impossible complexity. Trying, through the instrument of your particular consciousness, to understand its own nature. Consider the body for a moment, that astonishing architecture of tissue and electricity that you inhabit. We have been taught, in this age of specialization and compartmentalization, to think of the body and the mind as separate territories. The body, a kind of biological machine, and the mind, its somewhat bewildered operator. But this is a map that does not match the territory. The truth, as we are slowly and wonderfully beginning to rediscover, is that the body and the mind are not two things. They are one continuous conversation, one unbroken dialogue between sensation and meaning, between chemistry and story, between the ancient intelligence of the nervous system and the narrative-making capacity of conscious thought. When you feel fear, genuinely feel it. The body does not merely register the feeling as a footnote to the mind's experience. The body becomes fear. The adrenal glands open like floodgates. The heart accelerates into a kind of percussion. The muscles load themselves with intention. The gut, that second brain, that enteric empire of neurons and microbiome and evolutionary memory, the gut knows before the thinking mind has finished composing its analysis. And this is not a malfunction. This is the extraordinary sophistication of an organism that has been refined over hundreds of millions of years to navigate a world of genuine danger and genuine beauty. Your body is not betraying you when it responds this way. Your body is trying to save you. It is speaking in the oldest language, a language that precedes words, precedes culture, precedes the whole magnificent confection of civilization that has grown up around our fire-lit circles. The question that I think lies at the very heart of the psychological journey across every age of human life is whether we are listening. Whether we have learned not just to think, but to truly hear what the body-mind continuum is telling us, because the symptoms we call anxiety, the heaviness we call depression, the restlessness that drives us toward distraction and numbing, and the endless scrolling through the surfaces of other people's curated lives, these are not enemies, they are messengers. They are signals from the deeper self, from the integrated whole of what you are, saying, something here needs attention. Something here needs to be witnessed, felt, metabolized, and released. And this is where self-awareness becomes not a luxury, not a therapeutic indulgence for the philosophically inclined, but an absolute necessity of survival. Survival not in the crude biological sense, but in the richer, more demanding sense of actually living, of being present to your own experience, rather than perpetually managing it from a safe distance. Self-awareness is the art of turning toward yourself with the same quality of attention you might offer to a beloved friend in distress. It is the radical act of noticing what is actually happening in your interior landscape, rather than what you have been told should be happening, or what you wish were happening, or what you are afraid might be happening. The emotional landscape of a human being is not flat. It is not a meadow of predictable gradients. It is a wilderness, high peaks and deep ravines, sudden weather, hidden springs, paths that seem to lead somewhere and then dissolve into undergrowth. Clearings of inexplicable peace that appear without warning after the most arduous climbing. And most of us spend the majority of our lives trying to domesticate this wilderness rather than learning to navigate it. We try to pave over the complexity, to reduce the mystery to something manageable, something that fits neatly into the categories we have been given. But the wilderness does not yield to this strategy. It simply goes underground. And what goes underground does not disappear. What goes underground becomes the pressure that rises in our bodies as chronic tension, as the patterns we cannot quite break free of, as the relationships that replay the same wounding scripts no matter how earnestly we wish otherwise. Healing, and I use that word with the full weight of what it actually means, not merely the absence of symptoms, but the restoration of wholeness. Healing begins when we stop trying to manage the wilderness and start learning to inhabit it. When we begin to develop what the great traditions of contemplative inquiry have always called witnessing presence, the capacity to observe your own experience without being entirely consumed by it, to feel the feeling without becoming only the feeling, to hold the story of your suffering with compassion rather than with either judgment or theatrical identification. This is not easy work. Let no one tell you otherwise. The path toward genuine self-knowledge is not a comfortable weekend retreat, though retreats can be useful threshold markers. It is a lifelong practice, a daily return to the question of who you actually are beneath the accumulated layers of conditioning and compensation and carefully constructed persona. It is the work of a lifetime, and it is, I would argue, the most important work available to a human being in this age, perhaps in any age. But here is what I want you to hear. In the deepest register of yourself, this work is not beyond you. You are not too broken, too old, too young, too far gone, too deeply scarred by what has happened to you. The capacity for awareness, for growth, for the genuine transformation of suffering into wisdom, this is not a special gift granted to a fortunate few. This is your birthright. This is baked into the architecture of what you are. The very fact that you can suffer means that you can grow. The very fact that you can feel means that you can heal. The very fact that you are, right now, in this moment, turning your attention toward these questions, this is itself an act of profound courage. And there is something else I want you to consider. Something that I think we too rarely allow ourselves to genuinely absorb. You are not doing this alone. You have never been doing this alone. Every human being who has ever drawn breath has inhabited this same wilderness of consciousness. Every grandmother and grandfather who sat in silence with the weight of their unlived possibilities. Every child who felt the first shock of separation and confusion at the discovery that the world does not unconditionally conform to their needs. Every adolescent shattered by the sudden awareness that identity is a thing to be constructed rather than simply received. Every middle-aged person who looked up one day from the machinery of their life and wondered, with a mixture of vertigo and longing, whether this is really what they meant to do with the brief and luminous fact of their existence. Every elder moving through the long corridor toward the great mystery of death with its impossible questions and its strange gifts of perspective. We are all on this odyssey. We are all navigating, in our own particular and unrepeatable way, the same fundamental terrain of human experience. And there is a kind of solidarity in this, a kind of deep, wordless communion that becomes available to us the moment we stop performing wellness and start telling the truth about where we actually are. Because when you tell the truth about your own darkness, something extraordinary happens. You create permission for others to tell the truth about theirs. And in that shared honesty, something that had been isolated and shameful is suddenly recognized as universal and human, and the isolation breaks open into connection, and the connection is the medicine. The light. And I do mean this as both metaphor and something more than metaphor. The light that you are looking for is not somewhere else. It is not in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next version of yourself that will finally have it all figured out. The light is present in this moment of inquiry, in this willingness to turn toward yourself with curiosity rather than contempt, with wonder rather than judgment, with the patient recognition that you are, and have always been, a work in progress unfolding at exactly the right pace for what you actually are. Imagine what becomes possible when you begin to move through your life from this understanding. When the anxiety that rises in your chest in the morning is met not with suppression or dread, but with a gentle, curious inquiry, what is this telling me? What needs attention here? When the grief that has been living in the body for years is finally permitted to move, to be felt, to be witnessed, and to alchemize into something that no longer weighs so heavily, but instead becomes the ground of a deeper empathy for the suffering of others. When the self-criticism that has been the constant soundtrack of your inner life is gradually, painstakingly replaced by something that resembles that, actually is compassion. Not the soft, evasive compassion that never asks hard questions, but the fierce, clear-eyed compassion that holds you accountable, while also holding you worthy. This is the psychological journey across the ages. This is what every human being, from the first moments of waking consciousness to the last exhalation of a long life, is actually engaged in. The project of becoming more fully oneself, of learning to inhabit with increasing courage and grace the particular instrument of awareness that you have been given, and the world needs you to take this journey seriously. Not in some abstract, rhetorical sense, but in the most immediate and practical sense. The world is changed by people who have done the interior work, who have developed the capacity to respond rather than merely react, to choose rather than to be simply driven by the invisible scripts of unexamined conditioning. So this is my invitation to you, not a command, not a prescription, but an invitation in the fullest and most generous sense of the word. Join this conversation. Commit, even just a little more than you did yesterday, to the extraordinary and ordinary practice of paying attention to your own experience. Bring curiosity to what your body is telling you. Bring gentleness to the parts of yourself that you have exiled into the shadows. Bring the willingness to be changed by what you discover. And come back, return to this space, to this ongoing inquiry, to this community of fellow travelers who are, each in their own way, trying to navigate the wilderness with a little more grace and a little less fear than they managed yesterday. Subscribe, not just to a channel, but to the idea that your inner life is worth sustained attention, that the questions you carry matter. That growth is not a destination, but a direction, and that every moment in which you choose curiosity over numbness, compassion over judgment, and connection over isolation is a moment in which the world becomes, by exactly that much, more whole. You are not just doing this for yourself. You are doing it for everyone whose life touches yours. And that, when you really let it land, is a remarkable and humbling and ultimately beautiful thing to know.